In the gentle evening light, the intercom rang in the room. I wiped away the tears on my cheeks and glanced at the monitor. To my surprise, my mother-in-law and Sophia were standing side by side. They had come to help. Quickly, I went to the front door, opened it, and was surprised. "Come on, bring everything in," my mother-in-law instructed. People resembling movers entered the house, saying, "Excuse us," in cheerful tones. Perplexed, I exclaimed, "What's happening?" Liam, my son, hearing my confused voice, hurried down the stairs from his room. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, watching the movers busy at work. I replied, still not understanding. Turning back to Liam, I overheard my father-in-law James giving orders efficiently, and the movers brought items steadily into the living room and other spaces. All of a sudden, Liam's face went pale and he exclaimed, "No, you can't! Don't you know, Auntie?" His face had an eerie, white look. This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted. James turned around and the movers came to a standstill. With everyone's attention on him, Liam shivered. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Isla, 45 years old, and my husband Henry is 46. He's a calm businessman who doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble. Henry diligently works every day for our family. His favorite pastime? Well, it's watching movies with me on weekends. Up until last year, our son Liam used to join us. However, since he entered middle school, he's been more involved in extracurricular activities and spending time with friends, leaving us with fewer family moments." Though a sense of sadness lingered within me, Henry appeared to find it more heartening than anything else. He fondly recalls the decision not to attend the prestigious private college where his parents worked, opting instead for a local public college. He proudly talks about serving as the class president and student council president, highlighting his best friend from college. "Your best friend was James, right, Henry? You've always been such a good student," I tease. Henry laughs and replies, "My parents would have a fit if they heard that." Nostalgically, he adds, "Still, those were fun times." Curious, I inquire, "Are you having fun now?" as we watch a DVD at home. Henry simply responds, "I am." Then he glances around the living room and corrects himself. "Well, actually, it's more like happiness. We chose and bought this house ourselves. I have a wonderful wife, a lively son," he says with such sincerity that it makes me blush. "I couldn't ask for more." That's when you chime in with, "a gorgeous wife," I playfully inject, giving a swing of my arm. Henry chuckles, skillfully evading it. "Absolutely. Having a stunning wife brings me joy. Now the only thing left is to put in the effort to clear our mortgage. We're still in the process of paying off the mortgage on our home." Henry has organized things in a way that allows me to be a stay-at-home mom without worrying about finances. Feeling the warmth, I considered myself fortunate to have such a kind husband like Henry. As we sat side by side watching a DVD, I reflected on this. Henry has always expressed happiness with our married life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't as content before we got married, especially during his time at his parents' house. It's quite apparent given the strained relationship he has with his parents and his sister, Sophia. I heard that the discord began when Henry chose not to attend the college his parents had in mind for him. On the other hand, Sophia, who is 3 years older than Henry, obediently followed their parents' wishes. She attended the college they selected, maintained the high grades they expected, and even worked at a company they approved of. According to Henry, she couldn't think or decide for herself, and that's the situation she found herself in. It's convenient to follow your parents' instructions, but it also makes you reliant and incapable of making your own choices or adapting to different situations. As a result, she faced challenges in thinking for herself and making decisions independently, depending on the circumstances. In fact, when she began working, she discovered that she couldn't take any actions without clear instructions, and it made her feel uneasy. She left the company in less than a year. Soon after, her parents arranged a marriage for her, and she ended up marrying the man her parents chose, despite having Henry. They adopted my brother-in-law as their son, having him live with them. To me, it doesn't make sense to adopt a son when they already have a perfectly good eldest son, Henry. Speaking of their family, my father-in-law is just a regular businessman. I also didn't feel the need for them to stretch themselves financially to send their kids to private high schools. Oh, that's just silly pride on my parents' part. According to him, there's a wealthy family living near his parents' house. Their daughter was the same age as Sophia, and they used to play together as kids. However, from elementary school, she went to a private college and distanced herself from the other neighborhood kids. There wasn't any particular incident with that family, but Henry's parents seemed quite envious of them. They became determined to send their own children to private college as well, saving hard to afford Sophia's private college education. Due to the circumstances, our dinners at home were quite simple, but Sophia's lunches were always lavish, leading to a unique eating routine. Henry, without feeling the need to overexert himself, decided to go to a public college instead of a private one. I believe that was a smart choice. However, my in-laws were furious, and their feelings towards Henry changed significantly from that day on. They used to take pride in the admiring glances they received when talking about the prestigious college their daughter attended. When questioned about their son, they might have felt a bit embarrassed admitting he attended a public school. Still, they would have envisioned a life beyond unnecessary expectations, and it wouldn't have been any less wonderful. My in-laws and Sophia's family, along with their 3 kids, are currently staying in a rented house. I want to clarify that I don't think renting a house is a bad choice, but I can't help but think if there are other ways to use the money wisely, beyond just trying to impress others. They took on debt to send Sophia to a private college, and they're still working to pay it off. I've always found it challenging to understand my in-laws' views on money. This was also evident in the Christmas gifts. The presents for Sophia's children and Liam were noticeably different. It might be due to the difference in closeness since they all live together, but it felt unfair to Liam. A sigh escaped me as I thought about how Liam might be affected by all of this. My in-laws also didn't seem to appreciate the fact that we own our house, a 2-story one that's even bigger than their place with its 4 bedrooms. A study room? Quite bold for someone from a public school. Seems like such a fancy house is wasted on you folks, they occasionally say when they visit, making snide comments. Moreover, they nitpick little things, like a stain here or a discolored spot on the hardwood floor, and then casually remark, "It's not all that impressive after all." Honestly, I don't understand why they do that. If they don't like it, they don't have to come over. That's what Henry thinks. It's probably because they envy us for having money, but ironically, we own a house even though we have a mortgage. Henry chuckled, suggesting that their attempts to appear prosperous fall flat. My brother-in-law likely earns a decent income, and my father-in-law, despite being in his 40s, still works. However, their debts are holding them back, Henry reassured me. Yet when Henry and Liam aren't around, my mother-in-law and Sophia take the opportunity to visit. Lately, they've even started exploring the house while I'm making tea. "We should turn this into our bedroom," they say, making presumptuous suggestions. They believe the large room would make an excellent study for the kids. I finally asked them what they were doing, my annoyance evident. Immediately, they put on fake smiles and claimed they were just looking around. Slow with the tea, I closed the door to the room they were peeking into and asked them to return to the living room. My shock increased when my mother-in-law asked for a duplicate key. There was no way I could give her, someone who freely roams into others' houses, a key. There's a risk she might snoop through our drawers and closets when we're not home. After treating Henry poorly, it seemed incredibly selfish for them to request a key. I insisted on discussing it with Henry first. I didn't pay much attention to it and waited for Henry to come back before firmly saying no over the phone. "How can you refuse to give a key to your own parents?" My mother-in-law was angry. Unfortunately, we just couldn't trust them. "Please come over only when Isla or I am at home," Henry told her before hanging up. He emphasized that health is the most important thing, a saying that suddenly hit home when Henry was diagnosed with cancer. We were shocked when tests for stomach issues revealed the disease, and with each examination, more widespread cancer was discovered. The doctor said surgery was necessary, and without it, he only had a few months. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. Not just hospital bills, but also living expenses and the mortgage for the house. The happiness we had built seemed to crumble instantly. I was trembling with fear at the thought of losing Henry and anxious about our uncertain future. Clueless and scared, all I could think to do was to ask my parents for help. Since my parents had passed away and I was an only child with no other relatives to turn to, I decided to ask for help. "Okay, I'll go with you," Henry agreed. We went to Henry's parents and Sophia's family to explain the situation and ask for financial assistance. Despite the advancements in cancer treatment, Sophia seemed not to fully grasp the severity of the situation. The in-laws, though not as hesitant as Sophia, were still reluctant to provide financial help. "A few months ago, I heard that you had successfully cleared your debts." "Yes, we finally managed to do it," Please, we will definitely repay you. Just lend us the money for the surgery and hospital stay. The money you were planning to set aside for private school, lend it to us now, please. I'll work too. We're begging you. We practically pleaded, almost on our hands and knees. But no way. We've just recently started to afford a little luxury. I have an insurance policy that forgives my mortgage in the event of my death. When that happens, we can sell the house and repay the borrowed money. I'll even write a promissory note. We begged repeatedly. Despite our pleas, my in-laws shook their heads. Despite anticipating it, we were left in despair. Why don't you just sell the house now? Of course, we knew that might be our only option in the end. But if we sell now, we must subtract the remaining mortgage from the sale price and still have enough to cover hospital and treatment costs, as well as rent for a new home. I heard that even after moving out, Henry used to send money home when he was single. It seemed only fair that they spend a little money on Henry's behalf. No matter how much we pleaded, my in-laws and Sophia's answers didn't change. Henry straightened his back and replied calmly, "Okay, that's enough." As we were leaving, my brother-in-law came after us, saying, "Wait a minute, it's not much, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't have any savings." He handed Henry $4,000. That's no surprise. He was helping with the debt repayments too, despite their claims of finally paying it off. It was also thanks to him. "I'll try to persuade them again. Please don't lose hope," my brother-in-law said. We deeply thanked him for saying that. "Thank you. I'm really grateful for your kindness, but do you have any other ideas?" "Yes, just like Sophia proposed, Ed and I are considering selling the house." I couldn't help but express my surprise at the suggestion. Saying it is one thing, but selling a house requires procedures and takes time. It won't be fast enough for Henry, who is set to be admitted to the hospital in a few days. Even if we manage to sell, we'll still need to find a new place to live. It's not a simple, easy process. "No worries. I thought of someone who could assist," Henry said, smiling and glancing at me. Over the past year since he got diagnosed with cancer, Henry fought bravely, even though he was told he only had a few months. He succeeded in making lots of joyful memories with us, his family, despite going in and out of the hospital multiple times. Even though we had grown distant, when the doctor mentioned he might not make it back home, I reached out to his parents' place. After that, they did visit a few times, but they'd swiftly leave, remarking, "He still seems okay," almost as if they were checking how much time he had left. It felt like they were coming solely to gauge how much longer Henry had. I shook my head quickly, attempting to dispel such a grim thought. I promptly pushed away that troubling idea, convincing myself it couldn't be true. When the doctor instructed me to contact the family, I understood the end was approaching. I called without delay. My mother-in-law gasped, "Oh no, that's awful. We need to hurry." "Yes, exactly. Please come to the hospital room right away," I replied. She said, "Oh, sure, I'll come if I can," and then hung up abruptly. Despite the unsettling response, I hurried back to the hospital room where Henry and Liam were patiently waiting. In the end, only my brother-in-law, who rushed from his job, and Henry's close friend James arrived. As we all gathered, Henry weakly opened his eyes, glanced around at everyone, and then closed them for the last time. The funeral arrangements and other details were handled by my brother-in-law and James while we went home to prepare. My brother-in-law stayed with Henry, and James drove us there. We left in the morning when the hospital called, and now the sun was already setting. Liam and I had left in such a hurry that morning that we hadn't even cleaned up after breakfast. In the dim evening light, I turned on the lights in the house and sat in a chair in the brightened living room. I started flipping through a photo album, and as I did, tears started to flow on their own. Wiping the tears that fell on the table, I selected a photo for the memorial service. The doorbell rang. I wiped the tears off my cheeks and looked at the monitor. My mother-in-law and Sophia were standing there together. They came to help. They didn't make it in time for the end, but they came, I thought, and I hurried to the front door to greet them. I opened the door, completely stunned. "Come on, bring everything in." I heard my mother-in-law's voice as people who looked like movers entered our house saying, "Excuse us," in an imposing manner. "What? Wait, what's going on?" I exclaimed in confusion, hearing my bewildered voice. Liam hurried down the stairs from his room upstairs. "What's happening, Mom?" he asked, following the mover's frantic movements with his eyes. I don't understand," I replied bewildered, looking back at Liam. "We're taking over my son's house. You guys need to leave exactly. Get out right now." My father-in-law briskly directed the movers, and the belongings started to fill the living room and other rooms quickly. Liam, changing his demeanor abruptly, shouted, "No way! Don't you know, Auntie?" he asked, his face pale. "This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted." On hearing this, I was left in shock. My father-in-law turned around and the movers abruptly stopped. All eyes shifted to Liam, who visibly shivered. In the midst of this, someone entered the house without permission. James's loud voice echoed, demanding the intruders leave immediately. Startled, the movers, without confirming with their clients, hastily removed the belongings they had brought in. Confused about what to do, they left the items on the street in front of the house. Panicking, I turned around at the sound of my nephew's voice and saw my brother-in-law with his 3 children. The kids complained about their belongings being left on the street. My brother-in-law, usually mild-mannered, was visibly angry. Amidst their argument, he coldly announced, "I can't deal with you anymore. I want a divorce." Shocked, I asked, "Wait, what are you talking about?" My brother-in-law then negotiated directly with the movers to take only his and the children's belongings to his parents' house. Amidst this difficult time, I apologized for the trouble caused. "I'll request the movers to transport my kids and our belongings to my parents' house," he mentioned, not even making eye contact with Sophia. Following that, he and the children departed with the movers. On the street, Sophia couldn't hold back her tears, and my in-laws found themselves perplexed amidst the scattered possessions. Curious neighbors emerged to witness the unfolding events, transforming the scene into a distressing spectacle. "Can we at least bring these things indoors? They're blocking the way here," James proposed. I agreed with a nod. "Certainly, feel free. After all, this is your home." Perplexed, my in-laws questioned, "What do you mean?" Here's what really happened. 3 years ago, the day after Henry's parents disapproved of our relationship, Henry introduced us to an imposing man. This man was James, a real estate business owner, who even handed me his business card. Although I had heard he was Henry's college friend, his demeanor and presence made me mistakenly believe he came from another world. Even Liam, in middle school, was so frightened that he held on to me tightly. Concerned, I sneakily looked at Henry. Catching my gaze, Henry tilted his head and then burst into laughter after a moment. "Don't worry, it's all right. James might seem scary, but he's a successful businessman now," Henry reassured. Liam cautiously spoke up. Out of nowhere, James's eyes widened, and he playfully smacked Henry on the head. Despite Henry being unwell, he laughed heartily. Liam looked so pale that I worried if he was even breathing. Surprisingly, James didn't attend our wedding, even with an invitation. He also never comes over when we ask him to. Oh, that reminds me, James was often mentioned in Henry's tales of college days and nights out. Based on those stories, I had imagined him as a reliable and good friend. I never thought they were the same person until they both stared at me. I avoid weddings and home visits because my intimidating looks could create problems. "Oh, that explains why you're still single, right?" I chuckled as I watched their playful teasing. It was evident he was the James I had heard about. Both of them paused and turned to look at me. "Sorry, it's just that Henry can be overly excited like a child. He's always like this. James, keep in mind, a father's dignity is crucial." "Dignity, huh? Dad never had that in the first place," Liam remarked, bringing some lightness to the conversation. I informed James about how Henry felt disappointed for not being able to attend our wedding and expressed our desire for him to visit us whenever he can. "Thank you. Now, let's get down to business since time is limited," James said, suddenly getting serious. "First, let's assess the condition of the house." James carefully examined every room, including the outer walls and meter box. Following a thorough inspection, he retrieved his laptop and began typing. After a moment, he turned the screen to share his findings. "What do you think of this house price?" The suggested amount left me astonished. It exceeded our initial purchase cost. "Well, that's quite a generous estimate, but can you realistically sell it at this price? It's been about 8 years since we moved in, and it would be counterproductive if it doesn't sell. We haven't done any renovations in many years, and, as my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pointed out, there are stains here and there, and the hardwood floor is quite old." Ah, I remember Henry mentioning that. They were discussing how they planned to utilize each room, weren't they? James reassured us. "Absolutely, they believe the house is good enough to live in as it is. Don't worry, it will sell at this price." Henry also gave me his assurance. "You can trust James, okay? Let's proceed with this price," I said with a smile. James promptly placed several documents on the table. "Oh, and we need to find a new place to live." Responding with a smile, James said, "Yes, of course." Among the documents were rental agreement forms. "First, I'll directly buy this house. That takes care of your first concern. Then I'll lease the same house back to you. There, your second concern is also sorted." I was amazed as James continued. "I'll send the money from selling the house to your account in a few days. We can use it to pay off the remaining mortgage." James smiled confidently, a grin that replaced his previously intimidating look with a boyish joy. While filling out the documents, I noticed the rental amount for the house was $400. Both Henry and Liam seemed surprised, leaning over to look at the document. "You mean $4,000, right?" I laughed, thinking it was a mistake. James said, "No, it's not a mistake. That's what I owe to Henry." After a moment of thought, Henry replied simply, "No, you don't." But James began to tell me about their time as students. It turns out James was a real troublemaker in his youth, getting into police trouble and frequent fights that left his mother in tears. During college, James's single mother was hospitalized due to exhaustion and stress. Seeing his frail and diminished mother, he realized his behavior was causing her stress and broke down crying. From that point on, he changed his ways, stopped fighting, and stayed out of trouble with the police. However, despite his transformation, a cigarette butt was found on the school's rooftop, causing a small fire. The college made it a big issue, and due to his bad reputation, James was immediately blamed, risking expulsion. Fearing he would upset his mother again, Henry was the only one who believed in James's innocence. James fondly reminisced, "He was the only one who believed in my innocence. He was the student council president at the time, and we hadn't even spoken before that." I marched down to the principal's office to protest and gathered evidence by talking to fellow students. After much effort, I identified the person accused of smoking the cigarette. Despite the skepticism around, I believed his denial. Thanks to your support, I graduated from college, became a responsible son, and eventually established my own business. This is why I felt indebted to Henry. As a family, we gratefully accepted the rent proposal, marking the culmination of events from 3 years ago. Now, as Liam mentioned, I own the house and am renting it to your family. James assured us of the legitimacy, offering to show documents later. During the funeral, everything proceeded smoothly, and we relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment recommended by James. While unpacking, James hinted at an eventual return to the house. When I inquired, he shared a plan, whispering conspiratorially. Days later, we pretended to have forgotten items and, accompanied by James, returned to the house. My mother-in-law reluctantly served tea and snacks as Liam asked, "How's living here?" His father-in-law responded with delight, and as Liam probed further, we discovered an unexpected twist in the story. Liam nervously glanced around the living room, visibly scared. Recalling the strange occurrences, he told everyone, "You know, since Dad got sick, I've heard weird noises. Once, I even thought Mom had returned, but it was just the hem of a skirt at the top of the stairs. When I checked, no one was there." Interrupting his mother-in-law, Liam and James simultaneously looked upstairs, concerned. "Is someone upstairs? That's impossible." Sophia, who had been downhearted since her divorce, remained silent. Trying to lighten the mood, Liam said, "Cut it out with the weird talk. I didn't hear anything." Liam and James exchanged glances, quickly gathered their things, and said, "That's a relief. We'll be taking our leave now." They hurriedly left the house and got into the car. The in-laws, who had come to see them off, had frightened looks on their faces. In the car, everyone burst into laughter, relieved by the escape from the spooky atmosphere. James had a spontaneous plan, triggered by Liam mentioning seeing a ghost. According to James, it was a punishment for being distant to Henry. He questioned how parents and a sister could leave their dying son and start preparing to move into his house. As James drove, his words felt true, and he and Liam repeated similar things, leading to unexplained paranormal occurrences in the house. The in-laws and Sophia, frightened by house noises, mistook them for poltergeists and complained to James and Liam. However, James and Liam never experienced any of it. Liam remarked on the scary power of suggestion. Eventually, unable to bear it, the in-laws and Sophia moved out of the house. James, seemingly business-minded, helped them find a budget-friendly apartment. Reflecting on Sophia's tough situation after divorcing and having to work again, Liam and James applauded her efforts. They hoped the family would make it in the end. Returning to the house they bought with Henry, they lived there for $400 a month. The brother-in-law and his 3 kids reappeared, but Sophia's attempts to reconcile were unsuccessful. Once a month, James collected rent on the pretext of Henry's monthly death anniversary. After paying respects, they had dinner together, and James listened to Liam's college troubles. Liam and James shared a secret joy: James's stories about Henry's student days during dinner. These stories revealed new sides of Henry, making everyone laugh at the dinner table. Despite making excuses like a child, Henry's spirit seemed present, and they cherished these moments.